All right, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I guess it's afternoon now, for our Veterans Day event titled Muslim Americans in Uniform, featuring several trailblazing public servants that represent our community within the armed forces and beyond. Moderated by MAP's Vice Chair, Nadia Hassan. My name is Ahmed Mati, Board Chair of Muslim Americans in Public Service, a national nonprofit member organization that aims to build and formalize community, promote institutional representation, and facilitate the professional development of Muslim American public servants. If you're not already a member, I urge you to join today for free at mapsnational.org to do your part to share your talents or learn from others in our amazing, growing national community. Our event today is co-sponsored by the Muslim American Veterans Association and the Muslim Public Affairs Council. We thank them for their partnership and support. Our program will begin with remarks from our speakers, followed by some question and answers from our members and the broader community. Our event host and moderator this afternoon is Nadia Hassan, who is a commissioner for the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives for the state of Maryland. Take it away, Nadia.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for your leadership. And thank you all for joining us. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. And we really appreciate you taking your lunch hour to be with us, to hear from these amazing Muslim Americans in uniform. We have a distinguished lineup of public servants from the military with us today. And I am personally excited about this conversation because I grew up in a military family. My maternal grandfather was in the military in Lebanon, as was my father. In the U.S. Marines. And so as a young girl, I got to hear all about his experiences in serving in the Army and about his war stories as a combat soldier. And sometimes he would make us laugh. And he would say whenever he got held up at gunpoint, he would just drop his weapon, lift his hands up and say, "Don't shoot, I'm Muslim." You know, that really instilled a really a sense of pride for being Muslim, and it really meant something. And so my father has since passed, Allah yarhamu, but one of the things that I remember him saying most is that the Marines made a man out of me. And so over the years, my father passed down so many lessons that he had learned in his training in the military. Lessons like, if you want to be productive, wake up at 5 a.m. every morning. If you want to change the world, make your bed perfectly every morning. If you want to be on time, you need to arrive early, because if you arrive on time, then you're actually late. And if you arrive late, then you failed. And so it was lessons like these, as well as so many others, that I believe instilled in me a positive and transformational mindset to be able to reach high and to be the best that I can be at whatever it is that I choose to do. And so I truly believe that my foundational upbringing as the daughter of a U.S. Marine has grounded my character and bolstered my identity into the Muslim American public servant that I am today. And so for that, I am truly grateful. As Ahmed said, my name is Nadia Hassan. I'm a Maryland State Commissioner appointed by Governor Hogan in 2018 to the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives. And I also have the pleasure of serving as Vice Chair of Muslim Americans in Public Service, also known as MAPS. And it is my honor to be your host and moderator for this panel. And so before I introduce our panel, I'd like to thank all of our Muslim brothers and sisters who are currently serving or who have previously served in the military. And we even have a few of our own members, MAPS members, who have recently transitioned over to the Biden administration as political appointees. So I'm not sure if they're on the call with us today, but I just wanted to express my gratitude to all those who have served in the military. So thank you. And so without further ado, I will introduce our distinguished panel, but I'd like to note that they are all joining us in their personal capacity today. And I apologize, I also had to shorten everybody's bio because it would have taken me the entire hour to read through all of them, so forgive me for that. Our first speaker, we have Colonel Khallid Shabazz, who has 2 PhDs, 4 master's degrees, is a 2020 War College graduate, having completed a fellowship at the University of Texas. He studied Arabic at the University of Jordan and has authored 3 books. Colonel Khallid serves as adjunct professor at Claremont Claremont, Lincoln, and United Theological Seminary, and is a lecturer at the University of Washington. He is one of many firsts. He is the first Muslim chaplain to obtain the rank of colonel and the first Muslim chaplain assigned to a 4-star command. Colonel Khallid was the senior advisor to the commanding general on all religious affairs at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. The colonel has won more awards and medals than I can name in this hour. And Colonel Khallid has 3 children and 4 grandchildren. Next, we have Sergeant Madiha Latif. Madiha Latif is currently the Deputy Assistant Commissioner at the United States Treasury Bureau of the Fiscal Services, where she has oversight responsibility for providing day-to-day executive leadership to support the government's collection of over $5 trillion in federal revenue each year. Previously, as the agency's Relationship Outreach and Engagement Director, Madiha transformed the way the agency facilitated and adopted innovative solutions across its 225 plus federal agency customer universe. Prior to that, Madiha held several leadership positions within the private sector, supporting the State Department and the Department of Homeland Security. Madiha was a sergeant in the Army and is an Army veteran, having served in war zones with the active duty Army. Madiha has an executive certificate in public leadership from Harvard Kennedy School, and also has an executive MBA from the University of Maryland. We're also fortunate to have Madiha as an esteemed member of the MAPS Advisory Council. Next, we have Lieutenant Nabil Tahan, who is a Medical Service Corps officer with the United States Navy, serving as a health information professional, administrator, and researcher. Lieutenant Nabil has 2 master's degrees. He's completed a fellowship at Harvard University and has authored several journal publications in his field. Among his many firsts, he is the first and only member of the Navy Medicine to receive distinct tri-service Army, Navy, and Air Force achievement medals from a single tour of duty in Kandahar, Afghanistan. Nabil is currently pursuing a PhD in information sciences at the Naval Postgraduate School and is also completing his joint professional military education at the Naval War College in Monterey, California. Nabil is married to Dr. Ellie Altaf, who's a practicing OBGYN, and together they have a 3-year-old daughter and a baby boy on the way. MashaAllah, Mabruk, Nabil. Captain Maysaa, Ouza, is a victims counsel in the Victims Counsel Division, providing legal counsel, military base-wide community outreach, and comprehensive sexual assault response in tandem with the installation's family advocacy and sexual assault prevention and response programs at Grissom Air Reserve Base in Indiana. Captain Maysaa is the first hijabi to receive a pre-accession religious accommodation in the Air Force. Captain Maysaa is a 2013 graduate with distinction from the University of Michigan, Dearborn, and a 2017 graduate cum laude of the University of Toledo College of Law. Captain Maysaa's awards include the Air Force Commendation Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, and the Air Force Training Ribbon. And unfortunately, we were supposed to have one more speaker, but Imam Talib Shareef had a conflict in his schedule and will not be joining us today. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into the discussion. And I'd like to keep the discussion focused on Muslims in uniform, because I know you all wear so many different hats. So my first question that I'd like to pose to all of you is, what was it that inspired you to pursue a career in the military? And what was it about the Army that intrigued you? Was it always part of your career trajectory to serve in the military? And if I could just ask each of the speakers to keep their remarks to 2 to 3 minutes, and we'll start with Colonel Khallid.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you guys for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, first of all, but my personal hero is Maysaa. I love to see the work that she's doing on TikTok and throughout the world. I was already coming to the Army because, like your father, I needed discipline. I needed to learn how to be a man. I had a wife and 2 kids. I was an enlisted soldier, and I met a Muslim soldier in the field. I was Christian. Met a Muslim soldier in the field, and he challenged my beliefs. And so once I became a Muslim, a Christian chaplain said, because they wouldn't let me go to Juma and they wouldn't feed, they only had pork in the field. And so he said, why don't you become a Muslim chaplain to help people like yourself? And I gotta be honest with you, that conversation changed my life and my trajectory. And once I decided to be a Muslim chaplain, I decided to be a defender of truth, justice for all people, but also specifically for the Muslim soldiers. And that's how I've been here for 28 years. Thank you for the question.
Sister Sergeant Madiha, please. Are you not muted? No. Okay, let's move to Lieutenant Nabil until we can figure out how to unmute Madiha, just so that we don't waste time.
Okay, I think I can unmute myself now.
There you go. Go ahead.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for having me here. I'm very excited, and everybody here is just so amazing. Thank you. So to answer the question, I, unlike, Sergeant Khallid, I think I started my military career after high school at the age of 17. And it was, for me, it was more of a rebellious statement than anything, because, I'm of a South Asian ethnicity, grew up in New York City, to parents who immigrated to America when we were very young to give us a better life. And trust me when I tell you this, right? Like, for my parents, they wanted nothing more than for me to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. And I think you guys can, be with me there that when you come from a South Asian community, or even Middle Eastern for that matter, that's what we grow up with, right? So that's what my parents wanted, and military was definitely not something that they saw for me, especially as a female. It was not on their radar. It was not on anybody's radar, right? But my parents, especially my mom, right? She's a strong woman. She had 3 jobs, as we were growing up, which many times, made me, like the caregiver for my younger brother and sister. She knew that she was raising an independent and strong woman, right? And she got my dad to come around, and I think my fellow veterans and folks in the military, when you're going to boot camp, if you are under 18, you need both your parents to sign off on your paperwork, right? So I basically was I needed both my parents to sign off, and my mom is the one who got my dad to come around, and I'm very grateful my dad came around, and that's basically what started my military journey, and I am ever so grateful to my mom, because that's how I got started.
Great, thank you. Nabil? Lieutenant Nabil?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a connection issue on my end, so if you see me coming in and out, I apologize in advance. But Nabil, Tahan, what inspired me was I have actually military in my family line. My grandfather was in the military back in his native country in Bangladesh. So, just growing up around his stories, it's something that really inspired me to take it on even, as a kid when I was going through high school. I really wanted to join then. It was right around the time of 9/11. My parents were very concerned about a Muslim boy going into the military, kind of facing those issues at that time. So, I had to kind of push that back, but it was always something that just stayed with me. And I wanted to somehow, partake in this process of, democracy more than just, being a citizen. And so I always wanted to just, give back. And so for me, it was just a mission to kind of get there. And so I got into graduate school, and I told my mom, okay, you wanted a college degree, I gave you a college degree. You wanted someone, who wants to get education and done and get a job, I have a good job. But, this is something that I've always wanted to do. And so my story was I just walked into a recruiter's office and I said, hey, I want to join. And I was already in a master's program. And they offered a scholarship. They said, hey, we can help you pay for school too, and take advantage of that. And so it just kind of all worked out. And alhamdulillah, couldn't be more thankful to be a part of this organization. So yeah, that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you. And Captain Maysaa, please let us know.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Yes, thank you. firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to serve on the panel. It's an absolute honor, and it's an honor to be on this panel along my esteemed guest speakers and Colonel Shabazz. I don't often feel intimidated by people, but when I was told that you'd be serving on this panel, I'm going to be honest, I felt a bit intimidating. I follow you on social media, and you are very, very inspiring. So I hope that during this panel, we're able to hear a bit about your story, because I'm excited to hear that. So what inspired me to join? So I always knew that I wanted to serve my community and give back in some capacity, but I did not know, and I did not think it would be the military. The military was a very foreign concept to me. I did not come from a military background. At the time, I didn't even know a single person who served in the military. So I'm actually the first in my family to join the Air Force. So it wasn't until law school that I learned more about the military, specifically the Air Force. We had an Air Force recruit at the time who came to our law school, and he talked about the Air Force JAG Corps. And it was at that very moment that I knew that I wanted to join. I just wanted to be part of an organization that represented people from all walks of life. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. And I knew that the Air Force would have helped me achieve those desires. And in deciding to join, I did not join for myself alone. I joined for my immigrant parents, for my community, my people, for minorities everywhere, and for a higher calling. And really, that's what led me to join the Air Force.
Thank you so much. I'm truly inspired by all of your backgrounds and the great work that you're doing. I'm going to shift back to the Colonel Khallid. You began your career with military as a combat soldier, and then essentially put down your rifle and picked up the Book of God to become a chaplain. And so, can you talk about that transition from a combat soldier to chaplaincy? What was that like?
It was very difficult. I mean, as Nabil said, being a Muslim in the military is very difficult. And then being a Muslim chaplain, where some Muslims can hide, I walk around with a crescent on my uniform. So the transition was very difficult. So much so, when I went into my first commander, I was so excited. I'm kind of a energetic person, kind of upbeat personality. I go into my commander and I say, "Hey, I'm Chaplain Shabazz. I'm here. I'm ready to serve." And he says, "Hey, we got some problems with your religion and how you guys treat women. Have a nice day." And so he didn't talk to me for 9 months. So that transition for me was very, very difficult. But it was at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest teacher, obviously. It was at that time I knew I had to do something bigger for myself. Because in that instance, I realized the type of undercurrent that Muslims were facing. So I decided to give my life to the upliftment, not only of Muslims, but to all people who were struggling in the military. So that transition for me was very difficult. And I got to be honest with you, sometimes it's still difficult because it's only 5 Muslim chaplains in the Army.
SubhanAllah. Well, thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Sergeant Madiha, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your time when you were in the military, and what was the internal culture like? You clearly have, and you kind of touched on upon this in your intro, multidimensional identities. And I wanted to know if you personally faced any challenges or barriers to entry as a result of intersectionality.
That's a very interesting question, Nadia. And I will say this, right? So when I joined, people didn't even know that there was anything other than any other country other than the Middle East. People didn't know Pakistan even existed. And when I say people, I'm talking about, Americans, right? And it was unfortunate because it's everybody lumped me together. And so when I joined, many times I was, because of the way I looked, because of, I spoke a little bit of Spanish growing up in New York City. I had a lot of Puerto Rican friends, so I picked up a lot of Spanish. I was basically always molded in with other cultures rather than being known for who I was. So a lot of my career I spent basically trying to find myself and educate. So this was pre 9/11. Now let's fast forward to 9/11 happens, and all of a sudden, right, there is this boom of, oh my gosh, there is Afghanistan, there's Pakistan, there is Urdu, there's Pashto, there's Punjabi, there's this, all these languages. And oh my gosh, Latif, you speak this. What is this? Tell us about it, right? And so while I didn't experience any barriers to the entry, right? I did not experience as a female a lot of barriers or a lot of integration, hardships that a lot of my fellow, female soldiers had experienced later in the years to follow. I will tell you, for me, it was a very positive. It was a educational piece. I was able to educate. I was able to create awareness. I was many times accepted. I was in the room, at the table, bringing awareness, bringing education, right? So from that perspective, I feel like I did not have any barriers.
That's very interesting. It definitely a silver lining, and that wasn't always, that wasn't the case. And I know for myself, I experienced a pre and post, a different America in pre and post 9/11. But that, you're very fortunate that you were able to take that and turn it into a positive opportunity.
If I may just add,
Sure.
I feel like we were in a, it's almost like between the pre 9/11 and then the year or two post 9/11, it's almost like we were in this beautiful period, but not so beautiful period, because there was a lot of education happening, but there was also a lot of turmoil happening at the same time, right? So it's been interesting.
That's great. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Lieutenant Nabil, and I kind of want to continue talking about the internal culture of the military. And I know you were deployed to Afghanistan, and so I wanted to know from your experience, what was it like representing the United States? Did you encounter any adversities as a result of your deployment to a predominantly Islamic country? And how did you respond? And were you able to overcome some of those challenges and adversities from, being on the other side, essentially?
Yeah, certainly, going overseas and going. Luckily, I was fortunate to go at a hospital unit. And in fact, Colonel Shabazz, your name came up when we were going through training at Fort Jackson, because I was asking, I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a Muslim chaplain around here somewhere. And they're like, we've got one. He's kind of tucked away somewhere, right now. And I was like, oh, man, it'd be great. So alhamdulillah, it comes around. But no, certainly headed to Afghanistan, that was a difficult time because we were headed there for a military medical mission. And especially as a Muslim, to me, it was nice to be able to see the other side of it, because at the end of the day, we are trained to be war fighters. And so, our mission sometimes aligns with that really nicely when you're looking at the military medical mission of going there to actually serve and help those on either ends of the spectrum. We had enemy combatants in our hospital that were Muslims. And so, one of the incidents that I remember was we had captured two females, and they were injured during the fight, and they had come into the hospital. And at that time, they were trying to understand, they were kind of being hysterical and trying to figure out, everybody at the unit was trying to figure out what's going on. And so luckily, they're like, hey, Nabil's Muslim, he kind of speaks some of the languages around here, maybe he can do some kind of translate. We didn't have a translator on base at that time. And so I had the opportunity to go and kind of speak my broken Urdu / Hindi to kind of communicate with them. And the women were really just honestly trying to look for a hijab, because I think somebody had taken their hijab off as a part of the process. And I remember my mom packed me a bunch of these little almost like hijab things, but really like neck corridors to kind of keep your neck warm. And they double as hijabs. So I remember going to my bag and getting them the hijab and just seeing the face, look on their face and restoring some of that dignity. I think, it really brought to me like, oh man, this is bigger than what I expected to be here for. And so that just kind of started some of the initiatives that I took to kind of, we didn't have a masjid clearly dedicated at that time. So was able to get a nice big trailer for us to kind of do, Friday prayers and have a place for Muslims to go and check in themselves. And yeah, certainly ran into adversity. You're gonna have people of different faiths there, and luckily, I had a strong, supportive leadership who was able to say, no, this is something that he's taking on extra outside of his duties. We're going to support him to make sure that this is a mission that everybody can, take a part of and benefit from. So, certainly difficult to go down range. I'm sure everyone here that has done so can attest to that. But it's the narrative you create as a Muslim, and what you see, when you're representing us as a Muslim, ummah. I think that was what kind of can drive you to overcome some of that adversity and really shape what's going to happen for the next future of people that were coming down the pipe.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Nabil. And I think this is a perfect segue to my next question for Captain Maysaa. And I have to say, Captain Maysaa, that you are such a role model for young Muslim girls who might be considering going into the military. And so I wanted to ask you about religious accommodations. And so it was my understanding that when you first joined the Air Force, religious garments were not allowed or permitted prior to joining the military. And so can you talk about your journey in how you navigated that process and in trying to maintain your hijab as a Muslimah going into the military? Oh, you're on mute. Oh.
Okay, good. I should be unmuted now. Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind remarks. I really do appreciate it. And you're right. When I first applied to the Air Force in 2018, I was told, well, not when I first applied. I applied and I was not made aware of the Air Force policy surrounding the religious accommodation request. So it was not until I was selected and approved into the Air Force that I was told I could not receive a religious accommodation to wear a hijab in uniform, at least not until I completed commissioned officer training boot camp and arrived to my first duty station, which approximately would have taken about a year. So for a year, the Air Force was asking me to remove my hijab and apply for religious accommodation. And if my religious accommodation request gets approved, then I can wear the hijab. This was absolutely devastating to me, especially because it caught me off guard. I remember feeling so excited when I first received a phone call from my recruiter telling me that I got the job, I got accepted to the Air Force. And at the time, I didn't think anything would be able to take that excitement away from me. And there I was a few months later, receiving this phone call from the Air Force with an ultimatum telling me, hey, you can either accept our offer and remove your hijab or decline and keep your hijab on. This was not a simple request. I mean, the Air Force was asking me to choose between serving my country and practicing my faith. And at the time, I was 25 years old. So I had been wearing my hijab for 15 years. For 15 consecutive years, I've been wearing a scarf. I wore it at 10. I had never taken it off, not a single day. It's more than half of my life I've been wearing my scarf. So it wasn't a simple request. So I knew that I was not going to take off my scarf. I couldn't bear to do that. So I sought legal representation by the ACLU and a small law firm in Michigan. And they petitioned the Air Force. They threatened the Air Force. And a few weeks later, the Air Force came back with a letter saying, hey, we grant your religious accommodation request. Please don't sue us. So it was great. And then about a year and a half later in, I believe, February of 2020, the Air Force changed its policy. So now the new Air Force policy allows airmen, prospective airmen, to apply for religious accommodation prior to joining. And ever since, several Muslims, several Sikhs have joined wearing their articles of faith in uniform. I actually had the privilege of attending the first female Muslim, the first female hijab wearing women's she's a chaplain Sani Hajabin, her commissioning ceremony. This was in February of 2021 in Chicago. And I offered a prayer at her ceremony. And it was just so impactful for me to see someone who looked just like me. That's right. Wearing the service dress, wearing her hijab, her two-piece blue scarf. It was just so beautiful to see. It was very humbling. And that is because of the policy change. That's because we challenged the Air Force policy. So it was nice to see the Air Force do that. With the new policy, the Air Force created a safe space for people like us, for minorities, for the underrepresented, and they made us feel, valued and accepted and welcomed to the Air Force. And it was just such a beautiful feeling.
MashaAllah. May Allah reward you for laying the groundwork for future sisters. Yeah, and for all of you, honestly, all of you have done groundbreaking work in each of your respective fields. So thank you again. I'd like to turn it over to the Colonel. Colonel Khallid, you were the senior advisor to the commanding general on religious affairs in Guantanamo Bay. And as a Muslima, I can't even fathom what that experience might have been like, what to even be there in just the horror stories that we've heard. And so can you talk about that experience and share how, as a Muslim chaplain, you were able to navigate such a role? And were there any ethical considerations that weighed heavy on your conscience or maybe may have contradicted your faith beliefs?
Well, you made me scared all over again. I mean, I just, I still have PTSD from that.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
I get the call. My commander says, "Hey, Khallid, you're going to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba." And so with my limited knowledge, I said, "Oh my God, yes, I'm going to the beach. I'm going to hang out on a Navy base." And then across the timeline ticker, it says Muslim chaplain has just been detained for 75 days. So prior to me getting there, Yusuf Yee had been arrested. And so I was replacing Yusuf Yee. And so that sent over, you're talking about, I probably was 5 shades pale. I said, oh my God, what am I walking into? And so I go there and I'm just kind of trying to fill out the area. Of course, there's a lot of skepticism around me because the last guy got arrested. And so I'm the senior advisor to the commander. And so I go in and I take care of the Muslims, and I have to do these interviews were the most intrusive. Every Wednesday, I did interviews with CNN, Fox News, and all of these high-powered people. Well, in one of the news articles, it says that I was the Imam of the detainees, right, which was not true. And so it got back to the commander. And I tell you, I think I was 31 years old. I had never been cursed out like that before in my life and fired. And then just because my supervisor was there, I think 2 weeks later, he hired me back without an apology. And so that was one aspect. The other aspect, of course, you got soldiers and then you have the detainees. And so I had 1 foot on land, 1 foot on water, because I got to take care of the soldiers, but also my job as the Imam is to make sure that their religious needs are taken care of. And so sometimes the soldiers, and I can't tell you much because it's a secret, but they would do things that are contradictory to what those guys believe. And so I'm not a passive guy by any means. So I challenged the soldiers and told them, hey, don't do that again. So again, what that creates is now I'm empathetic to the enemy. And so the words start getting around. And I tell you, it was the most challenging thing in my life. I sat in my bed many nights and just cried myself to sleep because I didn't know what I was doing there. But within all things, I think it's part because of my personality. But by the time I left Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, at my farewell, I had about 350 people who came out and just showered with me with love, because we did a lot of things in the community to offset or to contradict what they thought a Muslim should be. And so it was tough, but at the end, just like at any of my duty stations, once they see you and see your heart and see your love for people, I think it changes people's attitudes. And that's the part that is very important that I think everybody should get on the panel and everybody who's listening. If you're in the sphere of influence, then you influence. If you're not in the sphere of influence, you're not going to influence, and then people can keep their stereotypes. And so that's that. It was a very difficult time, but by the grace and mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I did well there.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. Wow. I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Madiha. I also can't fathom what it would be like for a Muslima sister to be out there in war zones and, serving with active duty. And so can you talk about what that was like as a female officer and were there any policies or diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that focus primarily on inclusion of women in the military, in those specifically in those roles?
You know, Nadia, no, at that time, again, going back to those days, when I think about my time in the military, I only can speak to my experiences, right? When I was going through it, it was difficult because I was the only female in many instances part of the unit, right? I was also many times the only Muslim in those units, right? So it was very hard for me to experience a lot of adversity from that standpoint, right? Like I did not, what Colonel Khallid is talking about, right? I feel like it may have come a little later. When I was there, I was not experiencing that, right? When I was there was more of, there wasn't a education of what Muslims were, right? I was stationed out in Fort Hood. We did not have a Muslim, you know, a mosque where we could go. The closest mosque that I would go to was out in Austin. Like that's the closest mosque that I would go to, which was almost about an hour drive, right? So I just, from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint, I had to bring that about, right? I had to talk more about it with my supervisors, and I had to say, hey, I do want to go and pray. Like it's Friday, I'm going to go ahead and do my Jummah prayers. There was hesitancy, but I did not experience a outright, no, you can't do it. No, I'm not going to allow you to do this, right? I had more of that acceptance. So I will just say that from my experience, I had more of a acceptance, and I am grateful for that.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Lieutenant Nabil, would you say, and I think Sister Madiha kind of touched on this before, but would you say that Muslims who choose a career in the military kind of get a bad rap with our parents' generation, many of them who are immigrants, and you know, in that line of career choices, like, you know, what I've witnessed mostly, just like Sister Madiha, you know, Sergeant Madiha said, is that, you know, our parents want us to be doctors, lawyers, engineers, but, you know, our parents are not talking about us going into public service or the military. And so what is your advice on how we as a community can get started on changing those negative perceptions, perhaps regarding Muslims who want to choose careers in the military?
Yeah, so there's a bifurcation there, right? There's a big divide on, oh, okay, if I have to be a Muslim, I have to adhere to my duties as a Muslim, and how can I reconcile that with being in the military? And I think one of the biggest challenges that I've had is breaking that barrier and breaking that perception. You know, as someone who's part of, you know, the only person in his family in the United States that's a part of the Navy, and really in the larger community. When I got in, there was nobody in our community that was in the military. It was really important to show that, you know, kind of what Sister Madiha was referring to, making sure that you can actually, you know, take advantage of those accommodations, find those accommodations for those that you can't get, you know, show that there's a way to understand and you know, inform your leadership that this is something that's a part of my culture, my identity, my faith. So, you know, getting them to understand it is difficult. Also, from the community itself, sometimes it can be really conflicting too. So I would have friends that would reach out, you know, as soon as I join, and they're like, what are you doing? You know, you have this career happening, you know, you had all these things going for you, and now you're going to throw it all away by going to the military. Yes. And, you know, it was one of the main reasons that I really struggled to stay on social media, honestly, is because I had these friends who would message me and kind of say things that, you know, that you wouldn't expect from people that near and dear to you, that you prayed next to, and you know, broke bread with, you know, to respond in such a, you know, outlandish way.
Yes.
And so throughout the years, that's been something that drives me, is when I put on this uniform, I'm not just representing myself as an, you know, as an individual. I'm also representing Muslims. I'm representing Bangladeshis. I'm representing, you know, those that are in the community that we belong to. And so that brings about a certain amount of responsibility every time that we put it on. And so it becomes easier to talk to people and say, hey, look, now I've been in 10 years, and I can tell you there are ways that you can reconcile those two identities. And alhamdulillah, for me, it's going back to my community and speaking to those kids, and now seeing them, oh, they're, you know, going to the recruiting station. Oh, can I get the number of a recruiter? You know, all those kind of things really came about in the last, I would say, 3 to 5 years. But before that, it was a real big challenge, because there was this perception that Muslims in uniform just, you know, was antithetical to what we were supposed to be. And that's clearly not the case. You know, we can serve our purpose and serve our country and be able to do it with pride in our community. And so, you know, my advice is kind of what Colonel Khallid was saying. You know, you can't be a part of the solution if you're not in it, right? You can only change from within. So if you're trying to see a perception being changed, you can only do so from being in this side. And, you know, and throwing rocks and stones from the other side, you know, it just creates a bigger chasm. And that's not what we need as an.
Yeah. No, that's.
And can I just add to Nabil's, right? I think that's where for me, it just shows the fact that I joined way before Nabil did, right? Because I didn't have social media. I didn't even have to worry about it. I just cut those people off. But more importantly, those people also cut me off, right? But I didn't feel it. I was just like, all right, bye.
Right? That's why we're great. That's why we're grateful to you, Madiha, because you were there earlier and you kind of opened up that pathway for the rest of us to, you know, to get in. Did anybody go ahead?
Just to speak on what Nabil said, it's still a chasm, because just here, anywhere I go out, I try to be bold enough to wear my uniform where I'm doing the khutbah. And I got to tell you, here at the place I'm at, the social media went crazy. You know, what kind of Imam is that? He's wearing a uniform. He's a part of the problem. You know, Muslims are not welcome in the military. And so when you talk about being a Muslim and representing so many intersections, you got to be bold and you got to be courageous. Those things absolutely hurt when they say those things. But again, if you're not in the space to challenge those perceptions, we won't get very far. Like I told them, because we had a question and answer service. And one of the great things about being a big human being, like nobody's really coming up really close to try to fight me or something, because I'm an extraordinarily huge human being. But, you know, they kind of challenge the perception. And one of the things I said, we do Juma every Friday. We teach Arabic. You know, we got an $8,000 budget to buy books. We have Ramadan. We have everything that Muslims need, including a mosque where they can pray 5 times a day. And I got to tell you, it changed some of the perceptions. And I'll say this and I'll be quiet. We evacuated here from Tampa about 3 weeks ago. And I got a chance to go to the basic training down at Fort Jackson. By Allah's grace, I wasn't even supposed to be there. One Muslim family out in the field among about 5,000 soldiers got an opportunity to walk over. I'm going to start crying. Got an opportunity to walk over to that family. And the mother, I told her who I was. She didn't know. The kids didn't know. And I showed her the crescent on my uniform, right? And she just started crying. She said, my son is going to have representation in the military. Isn't that wonderful? Beautiful. You know, but that takes a boldness, that takes a courage, that takes a being unapologetic about who you are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And it's so important to speak up and just like you said, to be front and center in the political sphere. If you're not at the table, then you're going to definitely be on the menu. So something that I've learned. Yeah. So thank you, all of you. I'd like to turn to Captain Maysaa. And, there's definitely a stigma around hijab, not only in the military, but in society. I mean, I've felt it in the various, roles and spaces that I've worked in. And so many people see it as a limiting factor to one's ability to serve or carry out their responsibilities. So just wanted to ask you about your hijab. Have you experienced that your hijab has a limiting capacity in any way for you to carry out your duties or your job within the military?
Absolutely not. My hijab is not a limiting factor, not in any way. If anything, I believe it is an asset to the Air Force. And I'm sure many of the panel members can relate here, but it is our faith that drove us to serve our country. Like, many of us are involved in the community, many of us are serving or have served, and that is because our faith instilled that belief in us. And that is what ultimately drove me to join the Air Force. But of course, that was my perspective. When I was at boot camp, many of my peers had never met a Muslim woman. So I felt like I had something to prove. So I wanted them to see that, hey, we're just like you. I can do everything that you can do. Muslim women are strong, we're independent, we're successful, and we are making a difference in today's society. So I know that when
said here.
yeah. So when there were so many articles that were published on social media, and I know my friends were sending me some screenshots about the comments, and people were very concerned about the gas mask. Can she wear a gas mask in the hijab? Of course I can. And also, this is an extra layer of protection. So if anything, I'm being more protected than you are. So I can wear the gas mask. I can participate in the 5K runs. I can participate in the marching drills, in the mock deployments, in deployments. I can do all that. Of course, at boot camp, there were times where I wanted to give up, but I felt like I couldn't, because if I did, then people would attribute my failure, my quitting, to my faith, not to me as an individual. And I'm sure many of you here can relate. How many times have you been asked to speak for our community as a whole? And so I felt like I had to push through. I wasn't going to allow anyone to say anything about Islam. So I pushed through, and I proved to everyone that the hijab, is not a hindrance in any way. And I gotta say, thankfully, I have never experienced any discrimination in the military. Like, everyone has been so amazing. Yes, on social media I have, but in the Air Force, not at all. Yeah, Colonel Shabazz, you can understand TikTok, Instagram, all the times.
That's right.
That's
Let
so
the haters
inspiring.
hate. Yeah.
Hey, listen, when I see the comments on TikTok when they'll be on your sites, I want to fight everybody. I gotta tell you.
Too many people to fight.
That's right.
We'll kill them with kindness.
That's right.
So great. Okay, I want to take this moment to turn it over to the audience. I know you all have been so wonderful and have given us so much insight to your experiences in the military. So can we, Ahmed, can we unmute maybe the audience and give an opportunity for anyone to ask a question? And if you have a question for a particular person, feel free to name who you want to answer the question. And comments are welcome. If anybody is serving in the military among the audience, if you have, something that you'd like to add to the conversation, I'm going to check the chat box right now.
I think we already had a comment.
Yes.
Folks, feel free to unmute yourself. We trust everyone here, I hope. So I think you should be able to unmute yourself, not just flag it.
Okay, so there is a question here from Ra'id, who's saying, fascinating panel, mashallah. As someone who works for the VA, I am curious about unique challenges Muslim veterans are facing post-service, so after your service. And it's not specified to any one person. So if anybody wants to answer, Madiha or...
I could chime in a little bit. My first command actually happened to be the Federal Healthcare Center in North Chicago. And so that's the first and only, I think at this point, truly joint DOD and VA organization that's out there. And so we got to see some really innovative things that were happening, and being an information professional, getting to work on some of the utilities that we're putting forward. One of those was being able to take your military record from active duty and directly porting it over to your VA record. And so interoperability was one of our big things that we worked on. I had spoken to a couple of folks down, we have our little lunch area. We're always encouraged by leadership to go speak to veterans, because as young active duty military, like, you want to get that perspective on the other side. So a couple of times we had people come that were Muslims, and they always kind of shared their concerns about, oh, the lines are so long, it's hard to get, medication done. And the nice thing was having that information background. I was able to say, hey, we've got these programs, you can get medication delivered to your door. And, I understand one of your concerns is your medical record. Have you thought about, kind of having it looked at by some of our VA professionals that were there? And also we can even have a DoD person present at the same time. And so I know there's lots of challenges that the VA is facing, but certainly institutions like these that are kind of looking at the joint mission of combining the DoD and the DA, I think are accomplishing some of those things that hopefully will yield some results in the future, inshallah.
I guess I'll chime in there as well, Nabil. I think that's great information. I was thinking about it from a different standpoint, and I guess I'm the only one that has separated from the service, right? And I've been out for a long time. One of the things after separating from the service I found was this loneliness, right? This lack of community. One of the things I think the military does such a good job of is this community. And now look, right, as Muslims, we've created this community of military folks, right, that can come together, and there's this community. Once you separate, I think that kind of sometimes gets lost. I would say, that once you separate, don't feel lost and alone. You have maps. You have now connections. You have, us in the panel members. You have the, MAPS members. You have these different organizations. Nabil just talked about, all these different VA help that's available. So I would just say, make sure that you connect yourself before you separate, right? I'll just speak from my experience. I was very lonely to the point where I almost went back in. And they talk about this all the time, right? That one of the things that soldiers feel all the time is that separation, and that, oh my gosh, I can't exist after I leave. I am here to tell you that you can be successful, and you will be successful. Just remember, you're not alone.
I love that. That is amazing. And thank you for putting a plug in there for MAPS, because yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We are really connecting, connecting Muslims from all across the country, people in your field, as well as public servants from around, because that was one thing we felt that was lacking, is that Muslims who are serving in these roles don't have that community. And so I'm so delighted to be able to work with Muslim Americans in public service and to be able to connect people. So we hope that you all would stay connected with us, and be part of our family, because truly we are building a family. And there are many ways to do that, not only on social media and through our signal groups, but there are other ways to stay connected to our community. So thank you. We do have another question. What advice would you give to a I think they're trying to say high school student, but I'm not sure, who is considering service in the military? Sister Katara from Masjid Muhammad is asking, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, are you asking what advice would they give a high school student? Because it didn't say that. I believe that's the question.
Yeah, and I guess I'll jump in there too, because I joined from high school. I will tell you that if that's what you are thinking, or if your child is thinking, I would say encourage that, make it happen for them, because let me tell you, that was one of the best things that I did for myself. It gave me structure, it gave me community, it gave me a lot of discipline that, quite honestly, looking back, thinking about it, I'm not sure I would have gotten otherwise, right? Especially, again, I go back to New York City. That's where I was, in urban city. I am not sure I would have been disciplined to go back to school. And here I am, I have, graduate degrees, I have executive certifications, right? I would just say, encourage it, let it go and let them do it. It won't be bad.
Thank you. We have, I think, a comment. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. Thank you for representing our community with such honor as you serve this country. Thank you for your incredible insights shared today by all the esteemed speakers. So I echo that. I believe we have a brother Lyndon, who represents MAVA, which is the Muslim American Veterans Association, I think are you on the call? I wanted to give him an opportunity to chime in.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Commander Lyndon, thank you for being here.
Happy Veterans Day to everyone. And we really appreciate the panel here. We can see and we heard all the professionalism of the panelists you have on here. Imam Talib wanted me to send his regrets that he wasn't able to be on this panel today. But I'm glad that Brother Mati reached out to MAVA so that we could co-sponsor this, because we need to help build up organizations like MAVA, MAPS, Mosaic, and other organizations of professionals that serve the public. And so we look forward to continuing this partnership and doing more and becoming more influential in the society as American citizens. We have to always remember that we all are American citizens, and we want the best for our country and for our people. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Commander Lyndon, for joining us this afternoon. Are there any more questions from the audience? We are at the top of the hour. We're slated to close out soon, but if there's one last question that someone has, I'd love to take it.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
This is Shareef. I'm a member of MAVA from Masjid Muhammad. I'm 76 years old. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm third generation military. My father was World War II veteran, and his father was Spanish American War veteran. Woo! And I have a son who's Gulf War veteran, 100% disabled. So what I want to share with you as quickly as I can is it's been so beautiful hearing the stories of each and every one of you. And I so much want to thank you for what you've been doing and are doing. But we want to also address some of the seriousness of being in the military. Okay, and we haven't even addressed some of the things that are not happening for our veterans. One FYI, there's more homeless veterans than any other group of Vietnam veterans homeless than any other group in this country. Okay, and those who have suffering from mental health issues, okay, needs to be addressed by whatever you're doing and whatever you're doing, okay? I have a son who suffers from it. And if it hadn't, I got a call one day that he was sitting in his car wanting to commit suicide, okay? Of course, he called the VA hotline, and that's how we found out that he wanted to commit suicide. I was blessed that there was a lieutenant in charge, and when I pulled up in my car and had my military cap on to show that I was a Vietnam veteran, it's the one time I can truly admit I got my respect. They didn't come to me like I was some ignorant person. They knew I had been somewhere and done something. And I knew about life and death probably more than what they knew that was there trying to save my son's life. So saying that to say, it was a blessing that he didn't commit suicide. And I'm saying that to say that whatever you're traveling, whatever you're doing, we have to make it known that we're not getting served properly, okay? I'm still suffering from heart issues that I'm fighting. And I want to read something real quick to you if you guys give me 3 minutes. This is a letter that I've written to both of my congressman people, okay? And it's real quick. and it's covering 14 items that I'm gonna read real quick to you, and I hope you bear with me. The first one, settle all compensation pending and backlog claims ASAP. Okay, 2, increase enlisted active duty military pay to true living wage. 3, improve base living conditions for enlisted families. Take rental home repairs. This is real important. Take rental home repairs out of these private owned companies that are not taking care of these military enlisted people. It's a real serious issue that's not being addressed, okay? We need to establish, Colonel, maybe you can really help with this. We need to establish a maintenance division. We need to take it out of these private companies and train the military to fix our military families' homes. It's atrocious the way they're treating our people. Retain people coming back from these combat positions in career fields. We got the Job Corps. There would be a perfect place for some of these returning veterans coming back from combat to go in the Job Corps program already established, to train them in skills that will help them get jobs. Job Corps is already there. We're not using it. It's the resources not even being used, okay? Last but not least, establish VA street counselors. We need people in cars, riding these streets, finding out where these homeless people, brothers and sisters are, get them in the programs. If you're homeless, you ain't got no daggone computer. You ain't got no car. You ain't got no mailing address. We need to make services available. They need to be street counselors. We need to look through these medical records and find these veterans who are not taking their medical meds. Like my son, he's having constant issues because he stopped taking his meds. They need to look and see that if a person has not been in the counseling, been in to see that psychiatrist, somebody needs to go knock on that door, find out what they're doing, get them into the system, get the meds that they need, because we got people like myself. I went through the military real quick, 64 to 68, okay? Prior to the Vietnam War. I didn't go in because my father was a World War II veteran. I went in, he wanted me to go to college. I wanted to do street stuff. I wanted a job, all right? When I joined, they put me, I went past the recruiting office, 10 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock that evening. I was on a plane getting ready to go somewhere. My father came to see me off. He said, son, we getting ready to go to war. I respect you wanting to join the military, but we getting ready to go to war. Now here's where lack of communication go between fathers and sons. If my father had sat down and talked to me about us getting ready to go to war, I'd have been glad to go to college. I didn't care. I went in the military because I was being rebellious. I went through ranks very quickly. I received the Air Force Commendation Medal, made staff sergeant by the time I was 19 years old, got referred to go to the Air Force Academy. But guess what I read, y'all? The Muslim Journal was not supporting Muslims going to the military then. Imam Talib Shareef read the Muslim Journal after Imam Wallace D. Muhammad embraced us going into the military. So that paper did two things. Kept some of us continuing. I got referred to the Air Force Commendation to go to college and everything, but I'd already been over there and knew. When I realized what collateral damage was, y'all, that term, when you see people dying because they got one target, that I could not deal with anymore. I hope I didn't get over emotional, but that's what we got to think about. Remember what collateral damage is when you talk about going to war and what that mission is. I'm honored that I served in the military, but I am not so proud of the fact that I helped kill a whole bunch of people. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. I pray Allah, anything I said to make sense. Allah, please forgive me if I said anything in error. And I love each and every one of you for the efforts that you're doing. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. We love you too, and thank you for sharing those heartfelt remarks. I'm sure that our panelists here, are taking note And it is heartbreaking. I'm not going to lie. It was very hard to listen, and I am aware that, you know, the military is not perfect. I don't think there's any field that is perfect. There's a lot of systemic issues and problems that need to be worked out and ironed out. And I hope that maybe we can find a productive way to have, you know, future conversations on how we can help solve some of these systemic problems. So thank you for raising your voice and for being here. And unfortunately, we are out of time. This video recording will go up on the MAPS website probably sometime later today. We thank you again. I know how impactful the military training is. I was not in the military, but I did come up in a military family, and I know the impact it's had on my life personally. So I just want to thank you all for all that you do, for stepping up, for standing out, for being there, for representing our community in a field where we don't have a lot of representation. And if it's okay to share maybe email addresses with folks who ask, you know, just let us know, and we'd be happy to connect anybody who wants an email address. And I just want to again express my heartfelt thank you for all of you for being here, for all the work, all that you do for our communities and to uplift Muslims in this field and around. So thank you again. And Ahmed, do you have any last thoughts as the chair of MAPS?
I want to thank you, Nadia, for that masterful hosting, and thank our amazing panelists once again, all our commenters, Mava for co-sponsoring, Impact for co-sponsoring. Stay in the loop, join MAPS as a member, and then keep hearing from your colleagues, you know, in the future, inshallah, and build this community with us. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Massalam.